So here and in the next few videos, I want to put together a little retrospective / expose of my work from the last 11 years. So loosely, I guess you could say that I've been involved in the men's dating and relationship industry, the men's life coaching or lifestyle coaching industry. Although I wouldn't identify myself as a dating or relationship coach, I found along the way that so much of the work that's offered to men out there is so obsessed with the result and doing a meticulous list of things so that you get X result, it ends up feeling a little bit short-sighted, for want of a better word. So you can give a man a fish, so to speak, tell him what to say and how to say it so that he gets that one woman. Or you could teach him even how to fish, how to set up your dating profile, where to stand in the nightclub, what shirt to wear, so that you can hopefully attract an abundance of women as dating choices into your life. Teach a man to fish, right? But I'm much more interested, as far as the metaphor goes, in walking with a man as he learns how to irrigate the entire kingdom so that a civilization can flourish. And so I've found myself over the years quite disinterested in whether some of my clients get together with the woman that they're dating tonight or they even know what to say. I'm much more interested in the men I work with having a fundamental shift in the way that they view the world, learning how to get access to their own depth, contact themselves, unlock their capacity to feel their embodiment so they can sit in the depth of presence. And from that place, they always have a contact with their next honest, authentic thing to say and do. They don't have to depend on somebody else's script anymore. So that's what I've been working in. And also, going back many, many years, I started out my career as a coach. And I did I did my life coaching training twice, my first year of it, my life was a little bit in chaos and I really wanted to make sure that I had the teaching down. I also did a deep training and apprenticeship in the subconscious language that we use and metaphor therapy, so we can work on the deeper levels of how the brain actually cognizes the world. And I did a lot of work with coaching in groups, particularly for people in underprivileged situations. So I did some workshop days for long-term unemployed people, children in difficult, impoverished area of Brazil that were looking to come into the corporate world. And I was starting or have an opportunity to catch up with people that had the privilege of better educations and then go into the corporate world. And I was also building a consultancy actually in Brazil and in the Amazon, and I was working for a number of geological companies, just doing team building and intercultural stuff. And then I found the men's dating scene. So I came into this already with a deep training in psychology and life coaching and group coaching. And then this thing happened and it kind of blew me away, the energy and the passion of helping men overcome and come to that place of feeling real joy in themselves, that they can show up, speak their truth, have beautiful relationships to women. Now, what's kept me in this work for so long, 11 years, is that it's been really, really complex. And obviously I've had my own learning along the way. There's so much to learn about relationship, masculinity and femininity, how to maintain love over the long term. I've had my own personal questions, but just from a coaching and personal development point of view, I think understanding the nature of attraction, good sex, connected, intimacy, and the flow of relationship really takes on a multidisciplinary approach, needs one. And even with the multitude of training that I had before I stepped into this realm, I realized that there was so much more to learn. First of all, you're talking about men and women and their capacity to open to love and connect with each other. You need to dive into the psychodynamics of when they were children growing up. What did they see in their family, for example? How did they model stuff from their mother, their father? The pain already that might scare a man away from relationships is sown in those first years. So that's an element to understand. Then we've got the whole emotional terrain in the body. What do you feel? How do you feel it? Do you actually have any capacity to feel what is beneath the neck down? Or are you clogged up with years and years of grief that have never been cried or never been felt. So for anyone to feel connected to life, we need to go down into the body and start feeling a lot of the emotions that are there, right? And then there's questions of what actually is intimacy, and spiritual states like popping through into moments of sublime connection with other person. These require a lot of learning. And so to equip a young man who is trying to figure out how to have the greatest relationship he can with women, there is a huge body of work, I believe, that actually needs to be embarked upon. Yeah, you don't have to do this exploration if you just want some results, but like I said, I'm not interested in results. I'm interested in being with you as you irrigate the entire kingdom and learn how to be fully aware, fully embodied, fully sovereign as you step into your relationship life. So rather than the conversation of getting results in your dating life, it's much more a conversation about beauty, truth, and goodness. Much better to have moments of radiant beauty in your intimate life than many, many results. Much more interesting to cut to the truth and really lift up the hood and understand how attraction and intimacy works, so that you can be in that with mastery rather than simply get results. And the goodness piece is really interesting, because what is the part of your heart that really, really wants this? Like, if you've been following dating coaching advice and maybe you are sat there scheming, like, how can I learn all these lines and methods and put them into order so that I can get a woman into bed? You might have a lot of need to remain in the closet about those interests, a lot of shame about your behavior and your need to try and scheme and get results. But what is the goodness in your heart that actually has you be on this journey anyway? And what if you tapped into your own goodness, the sincere aspect of your heart that yearns for a beautiful relationship with women? I mean, if you get there, then everything, of course, changes, especially the amount of shame that you might feel. Anyway, one of the biggest questions that comes our way, of course, is from men that talk about body freeze, i.e., there I am in a house party, there I am with a group of friends, and a woman comes along and I notice I'm attracted to her, and then almost instantaneously I experience a body freeze and I don't seem to be able to do anything. I can't initiate a conversation, I don't have access to flow, there's no joking going on, or if she's a little over the way, there's no way I can bring myself to approach her even though I see her and I really want to. Body freeze is probably the one thing that men who are drawn to dating coaching, if they could just overcome those moments of body freeze, the whole issue would be resolved and they'll be able to move on in their lives. So let's talk about this for a moment. And let's say how it is. Body freeze is a traumatic response. You're moving through life with an openness and a flow. There is a trigger, in this case a woman, with a particular physique or look. You feel a sense of attraction, and then boom, the body goes into the freeze, or actually you freeze the body. You've learned how to freeze your body so that you don't have to come into contact with emotions or memories that you have a painful experience of. So you go into a sort of protection mechanism every time that you freeze. And it's trauma. Stuff happened in the past. It might have been big. I spoke before about what was going on psychodynamically as you were growing up in the family. That is going to sow possibly some very heavy trauma into you. But also there's just little pieces, almost micro traumas that add up over the course of a lifetime that can have a body start to freeze up. Jordan Peterson talks about this with his infamous analogy of the lobster, which is you're a lobster and you keep meeting other lobsters and having this kind of duel, and every time you meet a bigger lobster, it just pecks you down a little bit, so you learn your place in the pecking order. And I think one of the painful elements of school, high school, being a young adult, is that we continually measure ourselves and rub up against our limits in the pecking order from other men, also our kind of sexual worth in the sexual marketplace. And every time we kind of lose one of those things, there's another reason why we should just cower our body just a little bit, or secrete a little less testosterone a little bit, we become smaller and smaller. So micro traumas really add up and inform a body shape and inform a whole way of responding. And that's kicking in those moments that you have body freeze. So there are a few different types of trauma response, and these are really worth talking about. The first one, particularly if your trauma happened at a very young age, is a sense of leaving. So your awareness and your energy kind of goes up and out of the body, out into the back somewhere. That might go up and out in the form of hyper-rationalization, or you might just disappear into a completely different realm. And what you'll see is, if you're, say, in the house party, talking to a couple of attractive women, and your friend comes along and he's just gone, you're talking away, and you look over at your buddy and he looks like he's in a different realm. He's just left. And his response for handling the intensity, the fears that get provoked, and the trauma that is living within him in the moment is that he just flies out. Often when the women walk away, then he can slowly come back to his own body. So that's one type of trauma response, leaving. Another, or flight, you might know it as, in a better way, it doesn't mean that you run away, although you might look for, sorry everyone, I have to go for the bathroom. But energetically flight, or energetically leaving. The second type would be more of a fawning, which is, wow, there's a woman there that I really like, or my desire or my attraction is being fueled, and she's definitely got things that I would like to get. I'd like her attention, I would like her validation, I would like her unconditional love, ideally. I might mix that up with the body and then mess all that up and thinking that sex would be validation, but really what I'm craving is the motherly attention and validation, right? And so in a fawn trauma response, you might find yourself, or you might see your friend really going over the top to try and connect, using a lot of words, sometimes provocation, throwing anything he can at her to try and keep her in. And some of the men who do this might actually look charming in the short term, but you know it's more of a fawn if people start getting burnt out by the energy after a little while, or he's kind of spends the rest of the night in this response of, how can I get more of that woman? How can I get more of that attention? And that takes up all his mental and emotional capacity. So if you're in a fawn, reaching forward, trying to suck forth this attention and validation from women, it might look like active conversation, but you're not in a place where you're in your center. You're kind of a little boy trying to get attention, but you're not like a grown man who is actually very happy in his own state of presence, whether he gets attention from her or not. So a massive difference, and fawning is actually a trauma response. And then the third kind of trauma response is the classic freeze. And it's not so much, I got frozen ice cold, but what I see with men who freeze often is that every muscle in their body is actually going into a deep contraction, so that they become unmovable. Almost 100%, like even the facial muscles, everything conspires to turn their entire body into a no. I will not talk to her, I will not approach. You will not cajole me into going after the woman that you can tell that I'm attracted to. And it's a little bit of a shameful story, but when I did some of my very early coaching in this regard, I had a client in a workshop, and he went into probably the deepest refusal pattern I've ever seen. Like literally every muscle in him contracted, and he was unmovable. And a lot of men who run this trauma response end up with a body type which is kind of big, beefy, solid. Not like they're jacked because they're going to the gym, but they wear a tank actually around them. And so this client of ours went into this trauma response, and me and my partner coach, we were very much in this kind of flowing, easy, having fun, even schoolboy kind of mentality. And we decided to try and push him. It just felt like it would be funny and fun and maybe helpful for him to just push him along. And actually, his feet were so embedded into the ground that two grown men couldn't push this third grown man. He was too sturdy, and his trauma response actually was too vicious. And why I'm ashamed about this story is I was unable to understand what a trauma response was, and I thought maybe if we just push him we could do him a service. But it was amazing how thoroughly he was a no to putting himself on the line and sharing his attraction with this woman. And then, so that's freeze, and then the fourth type of trauma response is actually fight. And we'll talk about this more in the next video. I also work with a fifth kind of trauma response, which is a separation of the heart from the rest of the person, or a separation particularly from the heart and the sexual energy. And both the more aggressive kind of, I fight when I get a trauma response, and the man with a heart sex split, these two usually have a much more abundant life with women, although the quality of those relationships have a lot to be desired, because there's so much separation and volatility involved that it doesn't end up being a healthy thing. So 5 kind of overarching personality patterns, body types, trauma responses is really interesting stuff to look into. And going back to the dating coaching, what you can do, of course, is take some behavioral coaching, a bit of advice, a cheeky line, a new concept, a way of being. And if your trauma is only subtle, like only a little piece of you freezes or becomes disembodied during dating, then you can slap on somebody's behavioral technique and kind of bundle through, right? And to be honest with you, there is a portion of men out there in society, they just need a few little phrases, ways of bridging and compensating for the moments of trauma response, and they can bundle through and get the result with the woman they want, start the relationship and settle down and quieten down some of the restlessness and self-doubt that fuels their journey into dating coaching. Now, that's obviously problematic because say you've got a mini trauma response going on inside you, but you slap on a compensatory mechanism, it might work in that she'll tolerate it, and because of it can be really difficult a lot of the time to find a good man, she might tolerate the fact that instead of just being frozen, you've got some techniques that you learned from a book or from an instructor. But every time you go into one of those moments of compensatory, yeah, I applied my behavioral coaching that I learned, you are going to be really actually disconnected from the truth of your body in that moment, and other people will feel disconnected from you as well. Essentially, you're gliding through your life, a trauma gets triggered, and you put on a little mask, and you just kind of get through. And at the same time, this is the way the world works. Everybody is kind of doing this, and to expect perfection is perhaps too much in a way. But if you're really hungry, if you're really curious, if that kind of behavioral coaching doesn't appeal to you and you want a deeper level of freedom, or your trauma responses are actually so much that you can take all the behavioral level coaching in the world and it doesn't actually help you get through because the freeze is too great, you can't even speak the behavioral stuff, you've got to go in and do your trauma healing. There's no way around this. You cannot live a life of deep embodiment, deep presence, continual flow, accessing your best truth and expressing that exquisitely in every single moment if there are just too many moments of locking, leaving, falling, freezing, fighting that just happen reactively through your body. So do your trauma healing. I'll probably speak another time more about the healing of trauma. If this is the first conversation you're a part of talking about trauma, don't be discouraged and think that that word is some huge thing. For some people, trauma is massive and explosive and comes as a kind of shock to a huge life event. Often, as I said before, it's just little bits of daily pain that add up over time to create a trauma complex, and it's workable. Trauma is actually relatively simple to heal. If you've got enough presence and you've got enough embodiment, you go in with your presence or with the presence of the therapist and you feel what is to be felt. And it's almost like your presence and your feeling and your commitment to just staying there and accepting the pain that is, you kind of melt the pain. It's almost like the trauma is a glacier, and your awareness and your self-compassion is like the sun. And over time, you just melt the ice, and that stuck bit of energy turns into flow, and then the energy can start to flow and move through you and expand even your sense of presence. The most difficult thing about working with trauma is that as soon as we drop into our body and start coming close to that originating pain, another part of us can come in that puts the brake on the process. So when you're doing a trauma-based coaching or trauma-based therapy, actually the work can be very, very simple, but you need a high level of presence to go in and do that work. The difficult thing is working with all the tangles and the rings of the psyche that are trying to protect the trauma, because they're absolutely frightened, and that these parts of your psyche have not yet learnt that it can actually be safe to go in there. More to be said on this complex topic. But what you can do in the meantime, if you don't have access to a trauma therapist, or the process might be a little slow or mysterious and there's a long way through this underworld to go, committing to a daily embodiment practice is one of the most powerful things possible, because you're going in there and piece by piece you're training yourself to remain open, to increase the sensitivity of your body, to feel into the contours of some of these trauma glaciers beneath, and you're building up your courage and your stamina to stay with what is uncomfortable within your own body. If you're doing weekly or regular therapy or coaching, which is trauma informed, that can heal some of this stuff, then the best thing that you can do is actually pick up a daily practice along the way that starts to melt the inner glacier, so that your trauma-based coaching can work more efficiently. You're helping it along with your own daily practice. The other aspect that bears talking about here is, I don't think all moments of body freeze in front of a really beautiful woman, someone you're feeling very attracted to, is to do with trauma. I think sometimes there is a quality of rapture, which is more a spiritual experience, which also freezes the body, because we are really clueless about what to do when we come across genuine beauty in our lives. And there's of course the Stendhal syndrome, which is when a number of tourists went to the city of Florence, they would look before some of the buildings and go into the museums and end up collapsing, because the amount of beauty that saturates that city is too much for a person to behold. It's almost like, wow, when I see someone or something that I find really beautiful, my whole body goes into a sense of freeze. And so one aspect of this is learning how to continually move the body and stay with the body, so that I can continue in a state of flow and openness, even though I'm being blown away by this rapturous beauty. We don't have a lot of practice for this. Often people talk about a beautiful person as being breathtaking, or leaving us breathless. And that expresses the way in which our breathing apparatus stops. We're so stunned by the beauty that we see. We are rendered an invalid for that moment, unable to do anything else. So there, I think, is a growing of, say you're frozen by beauty, how can you keep your self-contact deep enough so that you can actually respond yourself as a living entity and not just get caught in the headlights? It's hard often to take pleasure in, just as much as it is hard to be with our own pain and our fear and our wounding when it gets triggered in life. So I hope you can see that all the behavioral dating coaching in the world is not going to help if every time you're attracted to a woman, you get kind of lost, or you essentially leave your body. You have patterns of fawning and trying to impress and trying to provoke her for validation, or you have moments of tension and freezing yourself. Do the deep inner work. I think it's the only real true way through. And I want to finish off by sharing a story, and this is something that happened very early on in my exploration into dating and relationship world. I had a a classmate in one training, and he used to say that every time he went out to meet women, he would feel this kind of nervous excitement. So dual emotions, right? There was an excitement for doing it, he liked it, but at the same time the nervousness had him feel a little bit overwhelmed, and it wasn't an entirely comfortable set of feelings to be with. And so he really wanted to get rid of that. He was like, if I didn't feel this nervous excitement, I would be cool, like a James Bond character. And he actually went to an NLP therapist, and NLP is a particular kind of work. And through hypnosis, you can actually become, you can release trauma, or at least kind of numb yourself to certain effects of trauma. It's a little bit nebulous to me, everything that happens down there in through hypnosis. But he had this experience where he managed to remove from his conscious awareness that whole feeling of nervous excitement. And he said he went out the following Saturday, and he went down the park, and it was the middle of summer and everyone's celebrating and sitting around. There's music festivals all over the place. And he went from group to group to group of women, introducing himself and trying to flirt and have fun with them. And every single time he just felt flat. And the amazing thing about this was, he said, I must have approached 60 different women today and had conversations with all of them. Like, that nervous excitement feeling that held me back is completely gone. Like, we hypnotized it away, right? Did all the work and destroyed it. And yet, because I got rid of the intensity of that sensation, I also lost all the excitement that came with that situation. And I actually hated the fact that I was so cool and so detached talking to all these women. It was like I didn't have a heart in there to be responded to. And I got very little positive feedback. I felt really confident, but none of the women seemed to warm to me, and there was no connection. And even though the nervousness held him back, the fact that he was nervous and the fact that he was excited had his heart kind of leap through his chest and actually create a really endearing moment, right? In the past, he would be too nervous to talk to women most of the time, but then he would do it, and just the rush and the sensation and the nerves that he felt actually turned into the sense of connection. And I think we've got to keep that. So if you feel nervous excitement, you've got to keep that. The nerves and the vulnerability of it is what makes you feel human, what makes your heart become available, what makes a woman feel like, oh, this is, you know, this guy is not intimidating. This guy is somebody I can relate to. This is really, really sweet and endearing. That's a really good quality. And then the excitement is like, I really want to speak to you. I think women like it when we show them a bit of excitement for wanting to speak to them. So he should have kept that, and he felt very, very forlorn that he went away. And so there's a sense of, let's do our work on our trauma so we can have maximum freedom possible. And if moments come up where we do leave or freeze or get stuck in a kind of pattern, can we have at least awareness of that and own that and speak that? Hey, look, I just got a little bit frozen speaking with you right now. I take a few breaths and I bring up some of the embodiment practice that I'm doing to help me come out of the freeze, but it's something that I share along the way, the intensity of what it's like to be intimate with another human being. Let's include that in our relationships as well. And I think however self-aware or however much work you do, even 5-10 years into your relationship with your partner who knows you better than anybody else, you're going to be tripping across internal stuff. And so it's really nice to have your relationship to women be a place where you can share all of that, not have to hide it, and not feel that you have to slap on the strategy of a cool guy or this dating expert to try and hide the fact that there's other stuff going on with it. I hope this video has been useful to you. Please respond with any questions if you've got any on the topic. I know that it's a big one and it touches so many men. And if you want a library of practices that help you go within your body and start to release the places where you get blocked and trapped and caught up, I have a course that's called Lover, Outlaw, Trickster, Magician, and there's a comprehensive section about how to become embodied, deepen your own self-contact, and start the work of coming closer to your traumas and your trauma spots and learning how to release those in a regular way.